Thank you for having me. I came in from the United States yesterday, so if I fall asleep, I apologize in the middle of this. And what I wanted to do is Max asked me to come because Max and I have been working together on some different things for the last couple years and follow up a little bit of what he's talking about. For the last 22 years, I've been working in the consulting world as far as high-performance organizations in the social sector, both in the not-for-profit and for-profit side of things. I've also started 2 not-for-profit social companies and 1 for-profit that I'm currently running, which is a software company that deals with a lot of the convergence and monitoring and evaluation and stuff in this sector. What I'd like to do is take probably a 5-week seminar that we do for high performance stuff and put it in 15 minutes, so I'll speak very, very fast. The first thing that I want to do is talk about how there's 3 different people or personalities that are in the entrepreneurial stage of an organization. And the first is one that we probably complain about the most, and it's the person that is always complaining. And they play a very important role because the social entrepreneur listens to the complaints and the problems to create the solutions for what they're looking for, and the complaints validate what they're trying to do. And if you don't have the complainers, you don't have the social entrepreneurs with the right solutions. The second is the person who creates the solutions and looks at it from that standpoint. And one of the things that we look at is when you create the solution, first focus on how to solve the problem. Understand why the problem exists so your solution is valid, and then look at what is the structure. Is it a for-profit opportunity? Because like Max said, there's going to be a new $1 trillion of assets coming into the space of impact investments for that for-profit side. If it cannot be a business opportunity, because business opportunities can address social entrepreneur problems more significantly in many ways because they create a better tax base, they create better employment, they create more sustainability. If it can't be done as a business, then turn it around and be a nonprofit, because if it's still valuable to solve the problem with a social perspective, then start the nonprofit side. And one of the things that's important in this whole thing is that there's this convergence that Max was talking about that's beginning to happen in the space. But for convergence to happen, it's very, very key that you have to be looking at outputs and impact. And many of the organizations in the United States, we have now 1.6 million nonprofit organizations, and they're focused in what I call the marketing dynamics of an organization, and they focus on activities. When you focus on activities, it's very, very hard to innovate. And the reason why is because you're creating funding sources through your marketing on those activities, and you have to succeed 100% of the time or lie, one of the two. And so when you start focusing on long-term outcomes of how to reach the impact, you can have in your activities and your outputs in that process a 25 to 30% failure ratio in that to innovate if you're going to have a healthy organization. There's not a business in the world that doesn't have failures, but you learn from those failures. And to create an innovative society of how we create a social sector is you got to have failures and a learning process through that. And so focusing on outcomes and outputs is a very important part of how we create the convergence in this space. The main players in this that are beginning to develop around this, and part of the reason why corporations want to get involved into this is because in the next 10 years it's estimated that the middle class around the world is going to grow by about 1.3 billion people. The people that are addressing the needs of those people right now are typically the social sector, and the business needs to partner with them because they see the business opportunity that can create for their businesses and expansion. And so the social sector and businesses are going to begin to merge as long as the social sector programs are actually combined with business practicalities, with governance and things like that, and monitoring and evaluation to handle that. What I want to do is go real quickly with some of the things that we learned because I spent time with my consulting practice with about 300 social entrepreneurs. We had an average growth of over 5 years of 2,000% on every one of the organizations. And we focused significantly on what is the transition and how do you get things done. And the 2 main metrics that we looked at is how do you create high impact and high efficiency. And the two have to go together. One of the things that we've done in the United States is we created off of our tax forms, which was the only structured data that was available to donors, is we looked at how do you judge organizations based on their performance of how they spend their money. Didn't tell you whether or not they made an impact or not, it only told you did they have good bookkeepers. And so the impact is very, very important from a standpoint of knowing that you're addressing your outcomes, you're innovating and you're working on it, but the efficiency is very important to understand that you're doing the best with the money that you have to create a better thing. Impact is focused, and I'll go through 7 steps of how to get to impact in a minute, and for time's sake I took out the efficiency, but efficiency is basically, do you have the right capital, do you have the right technology, do you have the right human resources, do you have the right governance and processes in place to achieve that? And those are important things to be able to understand that drive efficiency in this model. The next thing that we looked at, and this is a very important thing of where globally we see philanthropy in the marketplace right now, and it's what we call, back in the 60s, McKinsey and some of the other groups called it the DIKW continuum, going from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. The industry as a whole is in the marketing stage right now, and marketing in the United States is beginning to fail. You now have a 38% attrition rate with donors who are dropping off after their first gift because they don't trust the marketing or they don't see the results of what their gift gave. And so marketing is at a phase of where it's dying. And in this continuum, marketing never goes away. It gets enhanced by the next level that goes up. Each one enhances the next. Data is where you're actually taking and understanding what is important for our organization to measure. Information is taking that data and structuring it in a way to make it useful so you can make decisions by it. The hardest part is then the knowledge sector, because that means change. Now that you get this information, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to drive the change of your people, your organization? How do you do things in your processes in place? And it takes a lot of outside consulting in many cases to go through those sides. And in the information stage, it takes technology to really drive that structure. Wisdom is the duplication of those processes to be able to drive that change. And it's important because when you look at industries around the world, we use the example, 2 examples. One would be Walmart versus Kmart. Kmart had a much bigger footprint as a department store in the United States, and they focused on marketing and what we call the blue light special, of going out and trying to sell things cheaply and marketing all the time. Walmart spent 3.8% of their top line revenue on information systems to know what worked, what was their data points, how did they do that, and they put Walmart virtually out of business. The other example would be the United States auto industry versus the European and the Japanese. The United States continually did marketing, where the Japanese and the European markets basically listened to their clients to be able to understand what they needed to build, what the market wanted, what was working, what was not working, and how they did things. And they clobbered the United States auto market in about 6 years. So understanding where investments have to be made, because what we look at with donors is, in many cases, this is a matrix where donors look at the fact, where are their nonprofits, where are their for-profit entities in this space, and where they need to be investing in the infrastructure that Max was talking about to help them grow to be higher achievers in this space. And it's important to be able to look at, if your organization isn't moving up the ladder and refuses to do that, that's where you should stop funding them, because they're not going to be able to survive and grow and advance to be effective organizations in the future. One of the things that we look at is the logic model, and this is where I talked about with the innovation. In our software, we've digitalized this process, but it's really looking at what are your long-term outcomes and impacts that you want to achieve, what are the outputs to get there, what are the activities you need, and it's in that activities and in that outputs that if you focus your investors and your donors onto the long-term outcomes, and it's a 15-year outcome or whatever it is to change something in this world, then you have a donor and an investor for a long time, as long as you can keep them communicating with what you're doing. And then they will have the grace with the activities when they fail, because you're innovating as long as you're learning and communicating with that. And so it's important to be able to understand how to get to the outcomes, how to measure that, and how to report on that so that you can innovate and learn from this and market well in the right way. The last little piece that I'll do is just 7 steps to impact. When we talked about the impact side, the first thing that's very, very important is understanding the problem like I talked about. And understanding why the problem exists is more important than how you do the solutions. You can't deal with AIDS in Africa the same way you deal with AIDS in Asia. The reason why they exist culturally and socially is completely different. And so one of the things you got to do is really understand your problem. The second thing is really drive your solution that fits the problem. And we always tell people, be very, very careful for solutions looking for a problem, because there's a lot of them out there. And always look for solutions that are fulfilling a problem that they understand, and that's the basis of where they came. The next is the competitive market, your case statement of why you exist, making sure that you're not one of 300 other organizations. We worked with a foundation in a very small city in the United States that was funding 28 organizations doing exactly the same thing in the space. And they were giving them each about $2,500. And none of them were having huge impacts of what they were trying to do. And we walked them through a process to fund the 3 best ones and going through a process to find what was doing it, and the problem got solved in 3 years. And so attrition sometimes is important to be able to find which are the best ones, and too much competition in the space dilutes the solutions themselves. And so understand what your competition is. The next thing is really creating that logic model of a business plan and understand how to collect the data, what to measure, and how to do it. Then there's the capacity plan. Do you have the people, the facilities, and the resources to pull this off? Make sure you have the right business plan to be able to do that. The next is very important, is workflow and governance. Or do you have the right processes in place to be able to manage and measure your successes through that process? And the last is analytics of the reporting processes. Now that you have all this information, you're working with it, that's where you can learn and innovate through that process. One of the quick things is when you're going through this process, a lot of times you're going through complex change, is what we call it. And this is just a graphic where the X's are. If you're missing that, then you're going to be basically having, if you're missing vision, you're going to have confusion. If you're missing capacity, anxiety, and such like that. So understand when you're going through change to make sure that you have a valid plan for change and what that looks like, because otherwise you will have stops and starts continually through that process. Just a little bit about our company, and then I'm done. We are a software company that does monitoring and evaluation. We do workflow analysis, and we do the interaction with convergence. So we work with foundations and governments and nonprofits and for-profit entities that are in the social sector, and we connect them based on outcomes and outputs and how to measure that and how to collaborate and how to work together on these problems to be able to do that. And it creates basically reporting processes to know what's working, what's not working, and is it effective. So thank you very much.